let's not focus on the fact that the majority of the books I'm going to talk about in this video were read in the last week of the month. Hi everyone, my name is Chloe, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here today. Today's video is going to be my February reading wrap up. So I don't need to explain what this video is, but it's just me talking through all the books that I read in the month of February. February was, once again, a bit of a slumpy month for me. I have reasons for it, kind of. I read a book at the beginning of the month. I listened to an audiobook right at the beginning of the month, and then I started another audiobook and thought, right, I'm going away now. Like, I was getting on a plane, I was like, I can listen to the audiobook on the journey, and then I'll be able to like read a bit more during the week, but maybe not as much as normal, and then I'll get right back in it when I get back. And what I did on the journey instead was put multiple films on. Did not pick up a book at all whilst I was in New York, did not read on the journey back, watched again more films on the plane, and then continued to, well, you know, I did read a little bit when I got back, but I forgot about the audiobook that I had started, and then was doing a buddy read that I didn't finish until 3 days after the buddy read had actually finished, and I basically read most of the pages all in one day, and yeah, just kind of slumped for a while. And then I've pulled it back with the last few days of the month, and I'm actually feeling good about March. I have already read nearly 2 books, and we're only on the 2nd of the month, so I'm doing well. But February was a struggle at first, so I will talk you through what I actually did manage to read, which is not that much. Let me just grab my laptop first, and I will talk you through some statistics for the month. So during the month of February, I read 7 books, which is the same amount that I read in January, so 14 books for the year so far, which is actually still on track for the 75 goal that I've set myself for Goodreads, but is behind for the 100 goal that I would actually like to hit. I read a total of 3,088 pages, which was about 500 pages more than January, which is good considering February is a shorter month. The difference being that I read some graphic novel things in January and I didn't in February. So February, everything that I read was a novel with text instead, and that meant the pages were a little bit more. It does mean that I hit over my 100 pages per day. I read 110 pages per day. I'm still just under it on average for the year though. I do like to average out 100 pages per day, and for the year I am at 95.64 at the minute, so should be able to pull that up, especially considering that in January I was at 82. So I've already pulled it up a bit and should be able to hopefully during March. And then in terms of the page length, it was an average of 441 pages per book. Again, just showing that I was reading sort of bigger books than I did last month. For the way that I read the books, this is definitely showing the slump, because basically I read 3 that were entirely audio, 3 that were a mixture of audio and physical. So generally I was listening to the audiobook and then reading along at the same time. And then I read 1 book that was entirely physical. And I haven't actually sat and read a physical book that wasn't a graphic novel or like a book about how a musical was made that didn't have that much text. It was more interviews. I haven't done one of those since like midway through December, so I've been struggling a lot. So I've actually felt very good about the fact that I was able to completely physically read a book, and I actually read it pretty much all in one day on the last day of the month. And one of the books I've started for March is a completely physical read, and I'm doing well with that so far. So hopefully that's a good sign for like coming out of the slump, but we will see. In terms of age ranges, I read 2 YA books and then 5 adult books, which is exactly the same as January. Actually, I did not notice that, but obviously showing yet again the movement towards adult books. And then in terms of star ratings, I had 5 4 stars and 2 5 stars, which is kind of the opposite to what it was in January. So slightly lower ratings, but to be honest, I did enjoy everything that I read, just maybe not some new all-time favourites. I think the 5 stars that I read were rereads, both of them. So like everything that I read that was new was enjoyable, but just not like a new all-time favourite. Okay, so let's actually talk about the books, shall we? So the first book that I read I can't actually hold up for you right now because I don't have a physical copy of it, and that was Husband Material by Alexis Hall. So this is the sequel to Boyfriend Material, which I read a while ago. It was like just as it was coming out. I had been anticipating this one, and then it came out last year and I just didn't read it because, you know, that's a usual thing that I do. I look forward to a book coming out and then just don't actually pick it up when it does come out. And then to be honest, I did hear some mixed reviews about it, and that kind of put me off a little bit, but I actually ended up enjoying it quite a lot. I give it 4 stars, which I think is the same rating that I gave the first one, so not like a downgrade at all. It's just that I did have some issues with it, but I can understand why people didn't like it. So it's going to be hard to talk about this one without spoilers, because obviously we're a second book in a series. It's a little bit different. I think it might be the last one actually. I can't see what storyline they would do with these characters afterwards. But essentially it follows two characters whose names are going from my head. One of them is called Luke, and I can't remember what the other guy is called. So it follows two main characters. You've got Luke and you've got Oliver. Luke has well-known parents. His dad is a musician, and he has been in the press, and not necessarily for the best reasons, and basically they are trying to tidy up his image a little bit. So he embarks on a fake dating scenario with Oliver, who is like a lawyer and has like a better image, and they initially don't get on, but obviously, as you can probably guess, a romance ends up happening. And that's the first book. Second book, Husband Material, is set around a load of weddings basically. So a lot of their friends, colleagues, acquaintances, various people are all getting married, and this book is set over a series of different weddings, and it's talking about them and their relationship and whether or not that is something that they are looking towards doing. And there is a lot of conflict within this book. Like, these two characters are not the best at talking to each other, but it is very much within the dynamic that was set up from book one. That's how I felt about it anyway. Like, I felt that there is miscommunication in here, but it didn't feel to me like miscommunication just for the sake of a plot device. It felt very much like, no, these characters are like quite bad at talking to each other, and this has been established, and this is legitimately how this sort of situation would play out. So whilst I can see why some people didn't like it, because it's not kind of the like sequel to a romance that you might think it's going to be, where it's like, oh well, they got together in the first one, now let's show everything being happy, and they're like, they're going to be like some minor inconvenience, but generally it's just like a let's see them like in the next stage. There are like genuinely things to work through in this, and there is a lot of conflict. There's not that much of the book that is just sort of them being happy, and I feel like that's probably what people would have come against with it, but I really enjoyed it. I felt like it was handled very well. I'm actually reading another Alexis Hall book at the minute, and I feel like it's a similar thing where it is a romance, but there are other issues going on, and Alexis Hall doesn't seem to like just go for happy for the sake of happy. Like, they are like all of the books I've read of theirs that has romance in there always tends to have something else within it, and some like larger discussion that kind of takes over sometimes the just showing you like cutesy romance scenes, if that makes sense. But I enjoy it, so I'm not complaining. I gave it 4 stars. The only reason why it's not a 5-star is that there are some times that it just got a little bit too much and I just wanted to hit their heads together, but in general I had a good time. So the next book that I read, I kind of already said I started listening to an audiobook but then didn't listen to that for a while, and then there was a buddy read that I was part of. So me, Lisa and Meg were reading The Blade Itself by Jo Abercrombie, because this is the catch-up book clubs series that they are reading now, and we all kind of wanted to read alongside them, so we decided to do a buddy read together to kind of inspire us to read it. And I think Meg was the only one who actually stuck to the buddy read. Lisa did quite well until like the very last couple of days, and then got a little bit behind. I was behind on the first day, managed to catch up like by the second, and then just went completely off track. This is a hard one to explain because I don't really know what the point of this book is, which makes it sound like I don't like it, but I did. I gave it 4 stars. But basically it is a grimdark series. It's following mainly these 3 characters. So I'll read the synopsis to you actually, because I feel like this is probably going to describe it better than I can. Logan Ninefingers, infamous barbarian, has finally run out of luck. Caught up in one feud too many, he's about to become a dead barbarian, leaving nothing behind but bad songs and dead friends. Giselle Dunluther, paragon of selfishness, has nothing more dangerous in mind than winning glory in the fencing circle. But war is brewing, and on the battlefields of the frozen north they fight by altogether bloodier rules. Inquisitor Glockter, cripple-turned-torturer, would like little more than seeing Giselle come home in a box. But then he hates everyone. Cutting treason out at the heart of the Union one confession at a time leaves little room for friendships, and his latest trail of corpses could lead straight to the rotten heart of government, if he can just stay alive long enough to follow it. That's basically what it is. You've got these 3 main characters. They are all kind of on different paths, but throughout this book there is sort of a war that is starting, and clearly these guys are all going to be fairly important to the war. Like, there is a reason why we're following them all, and by the end of the book they are kind of all in position for things to happen, but that's it. Like, it didn't feel like anything major happened in this book. It was a lot of setup, getting to know the characters. The world building is done very slowly. Like, it's not sort of just spoon-fed to you at the beginning, where it's like, this is what the world is, this is what the magic is, this is what the political situation is. It's drip-fed to you throughout the book instead, and I like that because it doesn't feel like you're getting sort of an info dump for no reason. But at times I did just want like a little bit more, like, because at the beginning, like I said, I really didn't know what the point of this story was, like where we were heading, and because I didn't know a lot about the world and the politics and things like that, it was hard to even like try and get a like semblance of an idea of what it was leading to. At least if I knew like the political side of it, or like a basic idea of the political side of it, I could have like seen what they were building to, even if I couldn't figure out like where these characters fit into it. But it just felt like I was floundering a little bit for the beginning. It could be because I'm slumping as well, like it could be that I just wasn't taking it in. There's probably a lot of information that's gone over my head in this, but by the end of it I was very, very intrigued, because I am now like very invested in these characters. So I'm hoping that as I continue this series I will like it more. As of right now it's a 4-star. It's not like the highest 4-star, like it wasn't pushing a 5, but it's definitely not like a low 4-star where it's nearly a 3 either. It's like just very solid. Like it was a good read, but I need to see where this series goes to see whether or not it's like a series I'm gonna carry on past this original trilogy, because it is one of those ones where it's like smaller series within a larger world. So depending on how I feel about this first trilogy, probably depends on if I'm going to carry on or if I'm just going to leave it with this. We will see. And then we have the next book. So let me just like put context in for dates of these. So the first book I finished on like the 5th of the month, because it was the day before we flew. Then the second book I will have finished on, let me work this out, I think I finished it on the 21st or the 22nd. So like a big gap between finishing the first and second book. And then the next book that I finished after that is the one that I started on the 5th as the audiobook and then just forgot about for a while. And it is a reread. It is A Conjuring of Light by V. Schwab. So I was reading these along with Schwab along, but I got behind. I was actually not in the country for the live show, so I was like, it's fine if I've not finished it. But I still obviously wanted to finish my reread. I really, really enjoyed this. This one got a 5-star. I have already discussed my feelings on this series in the last 2 wrap-ups that I've done with these books in there. I'm just really, really enjoying, I just found myself really, really enjoying the reread, because the first time I read it, I always do this with fantasy books, like I remember my feelings towards like the characters and just like the general vibes of the book, but I do struggle with remembering specifics, like when it comes to like a month or so after I've read a fantasy book. Like a lot of the intricate details tend to go out of my head, and then once I've read it on like a second read, it cements itself a lot more, and that's when I tend to enjoy these sort of books a lot more as well, and it like reinforces that actually yes, this is something that I really, really loved. Because otherwise after, sometimes I'm like, I gave that 5 stars and I say it's one of my favourites, but was it? Because I can't remember a lot of it, but now I do. So definitely still one of my favourites. I really, really love the characters in this. I find that this series kind of just gets better as it goes along, because the first book is fun. I love like the setup of the world and sort of getting to know Kel and Lila particularly, but I really like as this book becomes more of an ensemble piece, so having those like extra perspectives in there. And I love all of the characters in this book, and I just had a really good time with it. I like how a lot of things kind of weave together. I feel like it's setting things up very well for the next series, even though the next series wasn't confirmed when this one came out. It's very much ends at a place that is going to lead on perfectly to whatever Threads of Power is going to be, because people are just sort of things are tied up enough for this storyline, but things are left so open that I just want to know more, and like more so this time reading it knowing that that sequel is coming. So I'm very, very excited to carry on. I believe there's going to be a cover reveal for Threads of Power soon, because V. Schwab puts out an email newsletter every month, and the March edition has been delayed because of 2 cover reveals apparently, and today on Instagram stories puts a countdown to something in 6 days time of a cover of a reveal of sorts. So I believe we're going to get the Threads of Power cover, and I'm very, very excited about it. Hopefully we'll actually get a release date as well. So yeah, can't wait to read more from this world whenever it is that we get it, but it should be soon. Next up, we have a final book in a series. Look at me completing a series. It's not a reread, this one either, and it is Heatwave by TJ Klune. So this is the final book in the Extraordinary series. I always say I think that's what the series is called. It was the Extraordinary, Flashfire, and then Heatwave. So YA series that is about superheroes basically, and I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. I say this with every book in this series. My only issue really is that the way that the teenagers are written is like, sometimes it's just a little bit too cringy for me. Sometimes I just can't, like, the main character, he means well, but sometimes I'm just like, he's too much for me. Also, like, the writing style at times is quite staccato, and I listen to the audiobooks for these and it feels very much like he said this, then this happened, then this, and it's like, it feels like that sort of rhythm. It doesn't feel like it flows the best sometimes, which, like, I know TJ Klune definitely can write that more sort of beautiful, like, flowy writing, because I've read House in the Cerulean Sea and Under the Whispering Door, and that has more of that writing style. So I think it is more of a choice than anything else, possibly because it is like a superhero book, and obviously comic books are in that more like staccato style because you're getting like one piece of dialogue per like panel, so it may be to fit in with that, but sometimes it was just like I find myself not able to concentrate on it, like whether I was reading it physically or listening to the audio, because it was so much like that. I don't know if you can see from, like, if I open a page, if you'd be able to see, like, particularly when they're having dialogue, like, it just felt very, like, you can kind of see here, it's just like a lot of like short sentences together. But I did enjoy it. I think it was a good conclusion to the series. Again, I really can't tell you too much about this one because there is so much that happens in the first one. But basically you're following the main character called Nick, who in the first book, well, actually throughout all of them, he writes fanfics about superheroes. And in the first book, he actually gets to meet like one of his sort of favourite superheroes, and things kind of go from there. There's not really much else I can say. He gets sort of wrapped up in this world, and anything I say is going to spoil it. But like I said, I feel like this was a good ending to it. I will say that at the beginning of this book, so there's kind of like a twist or a reveal like halfway through this book, maybe even longer. But the problem with it is it's a reveal to the characters, but it's not necessarily a reveal to the reader. Like, you don't know like the specifics of it, but from the very beginning of this book, because we've sort of read the previous one and we know like there's always like extra scenes at the end of the previous books as well, like an after credits scene in a Marvel film. It's like that. He puts in a scene at the end after the acknowledgements in each book, and after the last one, it sort of left in a very particular place, and there's always like a cliffhanger, and then it picked up and things were just not right. And like, as a reader, having read the previous books, I knew exactly what wasn't right, but I couldn't figure out like how it had happened. But that storyline then just went on too long of this character being like, oh, but like these words mean something, I need to figure out why they mean something. And it was just like, it should have been wrapped up a lot quicker, because it wasn't like we weren't fooled by it. So it just got a little bit boring of like, are you actually going to figure this out and tell me why it's happened, or are you just going to keep showing me that it has happened but giving me no reason for it whatsoever? I hope that makes sense. Anyway, I did enjoy it. Like I said, I enjoyed how it came together. I just think that there are bits of this that could have worked better. And then it was like the last couple of days of the month, and I was working. It was one of the days I was working from home, and I wanted to listen to an audiobook because I'd finished Heatwave and I still had like the full day at work, and listening to audiobooks helps me concentrate sometimes. So I ended up getting the audiobook for one of the other books on my TBR, because I read, I think, everything but one book on my TBR this month, which is irritating that I didn't manage to get to it. But it was the Bromance Book Club and I only had it like on Kindle, but I just didn't get around to sitting and reading it properly. But I ended up getting the audiobook for this one because I was intrigued by this one and I didn't want to put it off any longer and then not read it. And it is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. I enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. It was a cute witchy story with a romance in there. There was a nice sort of cast of characters. Basically, I should tell you a synopsis of this. It's about this woman, main character. What is her name? I am very bad with names. Mika, who ends up getting hired as kind of a tutor for these 3 young witches. And basically she's got to like teach them to control their powers before someone comes to visit their house, because they can't find out that these people are witches, and when you put witches together in this world, the power tends to get too much and things happen. She gets hired by this, we're going to say family because they are a family, but it's like a found family vibes, who they are raising these 3 girls, and she gets hired by them to go in and help. And it's basically just about that happening, but then along the way there is a romance as well, and it was a good time. It was really cute, and like I said, I really liked these sort of three young girls as well. Like, one of them just constantly wants to kill her, and I loved her attitude throughout the book. I did like the romance. My only issue with it is that it took them too long to get together. They started off sort of not necessarily liking each other, there was banter, then they clearly liked each other from a distance for a while, but then it just took ages for anything to actually happen. And I like my romances where I kind of see them together for a little bit, not that they sort of get together right at the end of the book, because I just want them to see them be happy just like a tiny bit. And it felt like it took a while to build to it, and then I didn't get as much of it as I wanted at the end. That's probably the only reason why it's a 4-star. Like, it was very, very enjoyable, but just like not a new all-time favourite, which is pretty much the theme of this video. Okay, we've got 2 more to talk about. The next one is another reread, so I will just give you brief thoughts on this because I definitely talked about this one on my channel before, and it is God's Grave by J. Kristoff. So I read this one for my read-along, Kristoff along, which is myself, Lisa and Catherine, and then we also do have the guest host for the Nevernight series of Ash. We will be doing the live show of this one on the 10th on Catherine's channel, which I will link Catherine down below so you can go and find it. And it's going to be interesting because there's a lot that happens in this. This is the second book in the Nevernight trilogy. Nevernight is about a girl called Mia who basically goes to an assassin school because she wants to get revenge on something that happened. Because she wants to get revenge for something that happened to her family when she was younger. And the first book is set at the assassin school, and then stuff goes down there. And this book is set after all that's happened, and this book in particular is all to do with like a gladiator battle type situation, and I really enjoyed this book, and I said cannot wait to see the reactions because there are twists and turns in this one that are very interesting. Again, sort of rereading it, I am now seeing how this is setting up for the finale, and I really liked Dark Dawn because I feel like you get a lot more information on the world as a whole. Like, the first one is very much like you are following Mia and this is what she believes and she needs to get her revenge and this is how she's going to do it. The second one is a lot of sort of Mia's eyes being open to things, like she finds out that situations aren't necessarily what she thought they were and she starts to question things a lot more. And then the third one is when, like, obviously everything sort of gets revealed, so I'm looking forward to reading that one and having it all kind of come together in my own head, because like I said, I remember I remember the big picture of it, but I don't necessarily remember the specifics a lot of the time, and I'm looking forward, like, reading this. There were bits, there's a particular scene towards the end where like you think it's going one way and then it's like, oh no, but now this has happened, and I knew there was a twist but I couldn't quite remember what it was, and then I was like, oh, now I remember, and I really love this twist. And I was reading the annotated copy as well, the Litjoy copy, and J. Kristoff had wrote a note in there that was just like, admit it, the first time you read it you thought this happened, and I was like, yes I did. That worked really well because that's exactly what he wanted to do, and it worked really well, and it almost still got me a second time. So anyway, this one, like I said, 5 stars obviously, and I'm very much looking forward to reading Dark Dawn next month, or this month really. I'm reading it in March. And then the last book that I read pretty much the entirety of it on the last day of the month. I actually started like a week before, read a chapter and then didn't come back to it, but I read this one. It was the physical read that I did, which I'm very proud of. It was a YA romance, but you know, still a physical read, and that was Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert. This is Talia Hibbert's YA debut, I believe. I've read the Brown Sisters trilogy from Talia Hibbert before and I really enjoyed that. This is a romance. It's a similar sort of setup. You tend to find that Talia Hibbert romances have some sort of representation in them to do with some sort of illness or disability. Within this book, one of the main characters struggles a lot with OCD, and the other main character is clearly got some things going on as well, but maybe hasn't necessarily sought out help for them. That's kind of a large part of what this book is. Basically, it's about these 2 characters who were friends when they were younger and then got to secondary school. One of them got popular. They had an argument about sort of one of them abandoning the other one, as happens. Don't talk for a while, and then they're just sort of academic rivals. And then they end up at this sort of wilderness retreat thing, which is basically something that they do to try and win a scholarship for university. And that kind of puts them back in each other's paths. And maybe the friendship comes back and maybe feelings start to develop within that friendship. And I enjoyed this. It was cute. I gave it 4 stars. My issue with it my issue with it. I love how, like, every time I say 4 stars, I have to kind of, like, I don't tell you what was good about it necessarily, I tell you, like, why it wasn't a 5-star. But it's because everything else was just, like, exactly what I expected it to be. It was cute. I really liked the romance between the characters. I liked the characters in general. I like characters that Talia Hibbert writes. It was what I expected it to be. My only issue is that, as I said, like, Talia Hibbert normally writes adult romances, and it felt like with this that maybe she didn't quite know how to take her adult romances and make them YA, because it felt like all she did to kind of do that was to take out scenes that may make it more for an adult audience, whereas the actual, like, characters themselves didn't necessarily feel like they've been aged down to the point that they should have done. So I mean, and I do get that, like, these characters are 18, so it's not like a young YA at all, but they were supposed to be, like, competing for this university scholarship. They're supposed to be, like, sixth form students, and I felt like you didn't really get the impression of them being sixth form students very much. Like, you barely saw them at school, which, like, at that age, that is, like, a lot of what takes up your time. Obviously a lot of it is centered around these wilderness retreats as well, but it just felt like there wasn't that much focus on, like, actually being an 18-year-old and all the stuff that goes with that. Like, they barely spoke about the actual process of, like they're applying for university scholarships, but they're barely actually studying or doing any of the work that will actually get them into university, which felt a little bit strange. And it just, I don't know, they just didn't read like 18-year-olds to me. It read like it probably could have been about 3 years older, and they were, like, leaving uni and leaving uni and competing for, like, graduate jobs and things like that. It felt like that would have fit what this story was more than making it YA. Like I said, it just felt like the only thing she did to make it YA was to take out those scenes rather than to actually sort of make the characters believably younger. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what it felt like to me. I still had a good time, I still enjoyed it, but it was just not quite, but it was just not quite as good as the other Talia Hibbert books that I've read, so that's why I had to give it a 4. So we have these books plus husband material. I was going to say boyfriend material then, but it was definitely husband material. I read the second one. So not the biggest stack of books that I've read in a month, but I'm hoping that March will be better. I am still busy in March, but I feel like I should be able to read more. I feel like I'm getting back into the sort of mood to want to read, which is a good thing. So we will see. Also, it's Marvel-a-thon, and I just really, really want to win. I should stop holding these books up because it's starting to hurt my hand. But yeah, Team New Gen's going to win for Marvel-a-thon, so I need to get all the points, obviously. But that is everything. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below. Let me know what you read in the month of February. What was your favourite book that you read? And I will see you guys soon with a new video. Bye.